Welcome to the Ear for Fear podcast, the horror movie podcast that boils and ghouls and dead alike are screaming for. Don't be afraid to listen as Rick and the Creeps bore their way into your brains, slither down onto your arteries, into your still beating hearts.
Hi, welcome to the Ear for Fear podcast. This is the top podcast that talks about scary movies or movies trying to be scary. I am Rick, joined by Jake, one of the creeps.
Hello.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm good.
Thanks for coming back out, man. I think the last time you were out, you and I did Event Horizon.
That's right.
And I think it's kind of appropriate that we're doing Hellraiser because there was a very Hellraiser Cenobite-ish feel in Event Horizon, and so this kind of transitions quite well. I think it was I don't think it was intentional. It's just kind of how it happened.
They might be spiritual cousins.
There we go.
The two stories. I mean, who knows that the schism or whatever that the characters enter when they complete the puzzle box. Who knows? Maybe it's the same place that the Event Horizon went to.
That would be kind of cool. Yeah, I could see it being in the same kind of universe or something.
Sure.
So, for those who don't know or maybe didn't listen to the 1987 Hellraiser episode, you joined. You came on that, and we did that together. And so when we were setting out a calendar, we're like, well, let's do the 2022 Hellraiser.
Sure.
And that's what we're going to do today. So let's do a quick little sound bite here.
Beat it. Their blood, their pain, all for us. What is it you pray for?
So, this came out last year. Was it like a Hulu original, I think?
Yes. I remember I was mad because I had to sign up for Hulu to watch it.
Just to see it. Did you really?
I did.
I think my oldest daughter has Hulu. I never know which one we have and who pays for what.
Right.
And I enjoyed this movie, man. I didn't think I would. Like, I went into it last year when it came out with kind of an open mind. I think I did that because I knew it wasn't a remake, because I'm not a huge fan of these remakes because they always end up screwing up the movie somehow, some way. And to me, it just feels like a money grab. This felt like this was just a whole new...
It was a reimagining.
Reimagining, like a whole, just completely different story. Because I know there were a million sequels with the initial Hellraiser franchise. I think I stopped at part 3. And after that, I didn't watch any of them. And I don't know how many they did. I think they eventually changed Pinhead from Doug Bradley to some other actor.
And I didn't see all of them. I think I know 1 and 2 I really liked.
Yeah.
3, I think I can probably remember bits and pieces of it. And I do think that I saw the one that ended up on a spaceship. I forget which one that was.
I don't know.
Something about legacy or something. But I think if I'm remembering it correctly, it flashed back between the original creator of Lamar Shawn's box. It had Lamar Shawn in it. And then it also had a spaceship where the ship itself was a puzzle box. Yeah.
And it really?
I keep meaning to give that one another look because when I describe it out loud, I feel like that's kind of interesting.
It sounds interesting.
I've seen it though, and it wasn't that good. But
well, I think there's that where, because you're explaining it, and it sounds kind of cool, but then also in the same breath, it sounds kind of hokey. Like, so the spaceship turns into some sort of box, or it changes like a puzzle.
It changes like a puzzle to reconfigure so that it can, if I'm remembering this correctly, perpetually reflect light and create light, something along those lines.
Okay.
But it seemed interesting. But I think that's kind of a thing about these Hellraiser movies is you can describe the plot and it might sound a little interesting, and it's really just a bad B movie. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it. I think that's with like. I think as those movies progress, like I said, I stopped at 3 because I saw 3 in the theater and I was not impressed. I didn't care for it, and I was like, you know what, I'm good with this franchise. And then they went on to do I don't know how many more, and I was just like, I just don't care. I'll be honest, and I think I've mentioned this in our previous Hellraiser episode. Was Hellraiser wasn't one of my favorite franchises. Like. Sure. I respected it for what it was. Like I remember when it came out, and and I started to kind of get into Clive Barker a little bit. I think I'd mentioned I'd met him back in the late 80s at a book signing, and so I went through that Clive Barker kind of phase where I bought a lot of his comic books, and it was like he was coming into town. I remember when Nightbreed came out, or Cabal, as you know, and so I went through that phase. But I was never a huge, and I know you were.
I was.
I mean, maybe you still are a big reader. Like I hate reading. I hate to say that. I feel it bores me to death.
Well, I still read a lot. I still read a lot of books. Now I'm going to throw the finger quotes up there because I have an Audible subscription. So I'm going to be 45 this year, and I've got 2 young kids at home, and I don't have time. I don't have a quiet moment to read. So if I want to read books, I got to throw it in my ear and read the book. Now, when I tell people, I don't say I listened to that book. I say I read that book still. So. I mean,
I can see that. I think because I'll be honest, I'm lazy when it comes to reading. I'll start reading and I'll start falling asleep because I get so bored, or the fact that I just talk myself out of it because it feels so overwhelming or daunting, like a task. Like I gotta pick up. When you read, you should want to read, right? Because but me, I look at it, go, oh my God, this is going to take so much of my time,
right.
And I don't even want to do that. So then I'm like, well, is there a movie, or maybe the audio way is the way for me to go? Like I could do that. Like I could just have it going in the background.
Yeah, I would give it a shot. Like while you're doing laundry, or while you're cleaning the house, or if you have a long drive ahead of you and you don't want to listen to music, you can throw some kind of an audio book on. Yeah,
I should do that. I guess before we. I guess I'll do a quick synopsis. I guess. I mean, this one again, because this is different than the original Hellraiser. So a young girl, she struggles with addiction.
Sure.
Comes across this ancient puzzle box, which, if anyone remembers in any of the Hellraisers, they're quite aware of the box. But she's unaware that the purpose is to summon extra dimensional beings. I'm not going to call them demons. I'm not going to call them angels. I guess people could argue that they're those things, but it's some sort of other dimensional, so that's kind of the gist of this movie. And before, I guess we start talking about it, let's do full spoilers.
1, 2, spoilers coming for you.
So I know, you and I really haven't really chatted much about it because we wanted to save it for the episode, but I really liked this movie, and I don't think you
did not.
Really?
There are things I liked about
it.
And
sure.
There are plenty of things that I do have constructive things to say about it.
Yeah.
But I think it fell into the same trap that these movies the Hellraiser movies always tend to fall in. Which I'll explain later, but tell me what you liked about it.
Okay, so I will tell you off the bat, I enjoyed the puzzle stuff throughout.
Agreed.
I loved the box and the different
configurations.
Yeah, configurations and throughout the movie, when let's say someone solves that particular configuration and they get cut, right? Then all these different things are happening where walls are changing, or there is one scene where like a Cenobite comes out of the ground and it looks like some Escher painting with all the stairs going.
Yeah. A good callback to Hellraiser too, Hellbound.
Exactly. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the colors, the palette that they decided to use with the Cenobites, because we're so used to like this leather and white pale, this pale, and I was like, okay, well, that was okay. I just love the route they went with this. Okay. I would say right off the bat, I guess that would be really what I really gravitated. I'm a sucker for puzzle stuff. And when maybe something is happening, right, but other people can't see it, but you're seeing it because you've now...
Yeah, you're
essentially becoming
a view character.
Yeah, and you're becoming a sacrifice to the box or the Cenobites or these other beings.
There's the scene where they're trying to escape in a van, but the character's been cut, and this is not something they can outrun in a van.
No, and so I think that's what I enjoyed. What I didn't want to see with this movie was I didn't want to go down the same road of, again, a remake, right?
Sure.
I'm okay with some reimagining of something as long as it's done right. And I felt in this instance it was. Now you'll probably disagree with me, and that's okay. And I know when this came out, I remember other people saying, "Oh, they just didn't like it," and then other people saying, "I really enjoyed this." Yeah. I guess when I went into it, I wasn't expecting a lot, and when that happens with me, then I'm pleasantly surprised. Like the Pinhead character, I guess the priest. I thought she was phenomenal. Like I was bored with the initial Pinhead character. Like I just felt it was played out at some point, and
they never fully explored like too much of the backstory. I don't want to say the backstory, but there were depths that you could go along to find out new things about this character. But continue though.
No. I mean, I that's kind of really. I mean, I felt the movie. If I had anything to say, I felt the movie was a little long. It's a 2-hour movie. I felt this could have been. We could have been in and out an hour and 45.
I'm with you.
I felt 15 minutes could have been trimmed. Character wise, I don't know the main woman who played Riley. I just throughout the movie, I felt she annoyed me a little bit, and I don't know why that was. Some of the other characters were fine. Like I wasn't like her brother Matt. He doesn't last long. I was fine with him, and his boyfriend Colin was fine. Trevor served a purpose. I didn't have much issues with him.
Yeah, he was probably what was supposed to be the big plot twist, I guess.
Yeah, but I kind of didn't. I wasn't surprised. I'd kind of figured that out. And Nora was the roommate. She didn't really serve much of a purpose other than to be a sacrifice.
Fodder.
Yeah. Voight, I mean, he was fine too. And then
the thing about Voight though too is like the actor Goran, what's his name? Goran Viznik, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
All I see is Ty Burrell from Modern Family.
The guy. I thought that too.
So that's all I see, and I keep waiting for him to talk like this or something like that. And I'm like, oh man, he just looks exactly like someone else. So that's all I see the whole movie, and it's somebody that, unless you had seen Zack Snyder's, Dawn of the Dead, you've only ever seen him play like these, funny, wacky, somewhat dumb characters. The Steve Carell, if you will, of Modern Family, but
yeah. So I mean, I guess right off the bat, I mean and we can talk about it as we go along with the episode. But I thought the way they conveyed the Cenobites and what they decided that their artistic, I guess, the creative way of them doing this, it was a breath of fresh air for me. I didn't want them to do the same stuff that they'd done in the past. Like, give me something a little different. And I felt they did that, especially with their color palette that they decided to go with.
I feel like they tried to do that, yeah.
Yeah. You felt that they, looking at you right now, the way you said it, you felt maybe they didn't execute it properly. Is that what you think?
What I would start with is what I did really enjoy about this was I did enjoy the stretching out of the puzzle box and how the different configurations meant different things. What was it like? Leviathan was the
power.
Yeah, Leviathan was power, and that was the diamond, I guess you'd call it, shape that takes place in Hellbound too. When it goes into that. But where going back to the color palette too, that's where it lost me. I did not enjoy the color palette. I did not particularly think that they did a fantastic job with the redesign. I thought they were serviceable redesigns of the Cenobites, but it was, to me, like, you could see what they were trying to do is the Cenobites didn't have the S&M gear that they had actually, had cut and pinned and stretched their own skin into these, costumes that they're wearing, which I thought was a fine attempt. But the palette in particular, I didn't like because I felt like they used that same blue, lens palette. So when you look at Pinhead, you would actually think that Pinhead is blue, which was something I didn't like about the original designs of Pinhead. So it was that the red stood out, but it didn't stand out. It didn't look practical to me. And that was the thing, is that these are all practical effects. This is makeup. And it looked to me kind of CGI-y.
Did it really?
Yeah, a little bit.
I don't think it looked CGI to me, but I understand that if we are to say this is their skin peeled back and pinned, it was a little more muted than it should be, maybe.
I feel like giving
but I guess I didn't have a problem with it. So I felt like this is the thing, like with Hellraiser, right? Like, what are they known for throughout the films, right? Hooks and chains, right?
And chains,
and those can be very gory
and
very uncomfortable, a little unsettling. There was some of that throughout this movie, but at no point did I feel uneasy, man.
Right.
And that's what I think I enjoyed because as I've gotten older, I'm not into the gore and I'm not into that self-mutilation stuff. It's not. And I know this was happening in the movie, but I don't know. I felt like it did a good job, at least for me as a viewer. Maybe other people would. Maybe you wanted more of that. Maybe you wanted those reds to be more red.
Not that. Well, I felt like the reds were on display a little too much. Like when I think, and we're going to stick in this particular thing, that if you're going to have skin that's being cut and pinned and pulled over things, I want to be able to see the discoloration of that skin when it's being pulled and all the blood has drained out of it and it's just been pulled. It's that yellowing of the skin. Okay. So that was just one of my many like problems with it. But ultimately, my problem is that I didn't like any of the characters. Yeah, I didn't like that it's being told from the perspective of these characters. And this goes back into the lore behind, which was one of the configurations, actually. Yeah. It goes back to, what is the puzzle box? What's its purpose? Why does it exist? And how has it been used throughout time? Well, I want to see the people who kind of knew what they were getting into it. I would much rather see this story told from the perspective of the Voight character or somebody else, and not just these crazy kids who are like the Scooby-Doo squad that stumble onto this spooky thing and now they got to deal with it. Like, I want to know more about it, and not just in the effect of the main character has to go, become a detective and do all this research, and then she stumbles upon this mansion and she reads and sees things in the book. Yeah. Like, I want to see the characters. I want to see characters that are actually going into that world, knowing something, and voluntarily going into that world, and then finding out that they, are getting a lot more than they bargained for.
But Jake, and I agree with you 100%, but that can't be done in an hour and a half or 2 hours. If you remember, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, and maybe this is your point too. Do you remember when you and I did the previous Hellraiser episode? We were talking about there needs to be a series, an 8 to 10 episode series where they dive in depth to the backstories of whoever it is. How did they become, let's say, a Cenobite, or what prompted them to go down this road for these, to experience the pain and of the flesh and all of these different, what led them to this? I don't think that you get this you're not going to get it in a movie. You're not going to, even if it's 2 hours. I don't think there's enough time to really dive into those layers. That's where a series needs to happen.
Maybe, yeah.
Because and I know you've read the books, and I know, so when you go into this, I think because you're, I don't know if you hold the Clive Barker's book to heart, where it's like, I really enjoyed it, I really cared for it, and you can see like this, the depth that we're talking about.
Yeah, there is a story, there is a lore there is kind of a world that is explored, and to know Clive Barker, to know it's not just in this work, it's in other works of his too.
We've World would be one, right?
Yeah, but it's there. I don't like the idea of, in the first one, you say Kirsty Cotton is an unwitting, participant, and she's one. But now we are dealing with 5 unwitting participants, and we have to see them experience all of this stuff for the first time. We all know it's coming. I think the way that they could have done this, and I actually got into my head, and I'm like, okay, Jake, you're making this argument about this movie. Like, how would you have done it?
Yeah.
I had this thought of where you have 3 or 4 characters, and maybe they're meeting at this mansion of this billionaire, this eccentric billionaire, and each of them are like really depraved. Like these are people with a past. They've really gotten to the point where they're in the underworld. They're doing bad shit. They're doing disgusting shit. They're really into, they're just following everything sexual, everything S&M. They've gone down that rabbit hole in one way or another, and different facets of that. And so you have these people who have, along that little journey that they've been on doing this awful, shocking, terrible stuff, they've started to hear rumors about this box. And so they end up running into somebody in some way or shape or form, the way that Frank Cotton hears about this box, and he goes and he meets a guy somewhere in the Far East and gets sold the box. But anyway, they go to this place. They hear about this party that they have anyway, and as part of the party, there's a ritual where the box is solved, and I don't know, I didn't go too deep into that, but I want to see people who know what they're doing and are voluntarily going into this place and see the way that they do it. But I guess you wind up with the problem of, okay, so where do you put the hero? Where do you put the likable character, the character that you sympathize with? I'm like, I don't know, because I didn't sympathize with any of these characters either.
I really didn't either. I agree. I agree as to the characters, and I think what you're saying as to a potential story is, it sounds interesting. It's just is how do I say this? How many people are going to jump on board that story? And and so they go. So then when a studio gets involved, it's like, okay, what route do we go? We have to make this for the masses, right? Not everyone obviously is going to be into it, but enough people that, and I think this is the result of that. I really, really believe this needs to have a series, and that series needs to kind of not be restricted on the backstories and the depth to all of these characters. I really want to know what made them go down that rabbit hole.
Sure.
What brought them there? And then when they got there and something happened to them, the priest or say any of these chatterer, how did all of that come to,
Well, what's implied in all of this is that when people finally do solve this box, they get more than they bargained for, and they get tortured and ripped apart. But there's also going to be that, the 1% of those people who get there, and it is like he says, angels to some, demons to others, but some people are going to be like, yes, this is my thing. This is my jam. And maybe is it those people that become Cenobites? Obviously the Cenobite lore kind of takes place a little more at the end of this movie, and we see somebody become a Cenobite. But
I
Like-
want to talk about the audience with God, because
Sure.
and we don't have to do that right now. We can do that towards the end, but I interpreted that as a couple different ways, because hell, we'll talk about it right now.
Yeah.
Do the Cenobites believe they're gods? And that's what they're referring to, or do the Cenobites answer to a higher being that we just don't see?
Like what we see is that the Leviathan is the god that the Cenobites all work for or deal with, you know. And I would have liked to have seen the engineer character that's in the original Hellbound Heart novel. Because Pinhead, we call him Pinhead, and we probably talked about this in the last movie. Clive Barker always hated Pinhead.
Yeah.
So colloquially, I'm going to use Pinhead because, you know, that's just what we all know him as. But he would probably want us to use the Hell Priest, which is what the character's called in IMDb and whatnot.
Yeah.
But they serve Leviathan, which is that god, you know, and that god in Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, you see that god is what would create Cenobites, because we see Dr. Chenard become, get turned into a Cenobite. But in this, it's the same thing. It's this guy, he doesn't just want to solve the box. He knows what the box does, and he tricks people into solving it so that he can be there, but not be the subject of that. And he's trying to, get an audience with this god so that he can talk to him and find some higher truth or get power or something.
Well, I mean, his initial was because what was out of the 6? I think there were 6 of them, right? 6 things. I can't remember. Like, one was sensation, which I think is what he chose.
Yes.
One was love. One was maybe true. I don't remember all of them. Truth or power or
lament.
Lament,
which is the one we all know, and apparently that configuration is the box, right?
Yeah.
Leviathan is the longer diamond shape.
Yeah.
There was lore, which was information, knowledge,
truth, or something like that. I can't remember.
God, I really should remember these.
See, the thing was, if there were 6 configurations, does that mean there's 6 sacrifices? Because did I miss?
Agreed. They could have gone into much more detail about that. That was what I think they missed about having each of those. Like, if you were going to have those 6 different configurations, they should have had each of the people who were there, solve that particular part of the box, and then we could actually see the difference of what happens to them. Like, it would have been really interesting to explore all of those with each of these characters. Like, oh, you solved lament. Now what you're going to see is, grieving. What's grieving?
Yeah.
What the person you care about most dying,
Yeah, yeah. But was there 6 sacrifices? If there were 6 well, I guess we could say the first configuration is just already there, right?
Yeah.
So really, if in the scheme of things, it has to change configuration 5 times.
Right.
But was there 5?
And that's where we pick
Was there
up.
5 sacrifices?
I'm not sure.
Because
that's where we pick up at the beginning when you got the guy, the sacrifice in the beginning. It's already in.
It
seems like it needs to go through. He's trying to get it all the way through to Leviathan so that he can be granted his audience. And so that's what we see is the 5th configuration being solved by the dude at the party.
Joey or something like that. Yeah.
And, and he's the first sacrifice, but
he was really the last
5th
sacrifice.
Yeah.
We were just seeing, and then of course the box kind of it basically kind of goes back, right?
Yeah, we don't see it happen. We don't know how it happened, but in one way or another, when it's discovered by Riley.
Riley and Trevor, right?
It appears to be in the lament configuration, so maybe that's the first one.
Because like 5 or maybe around 6 or 7 years has passed since the beginning of the movie where we see, because I was I'm thinking, okay, well, if that's the first configuration, then it changes 5 times, then there would have to be 5 sacrifices, and I was going through. We know the brother. Matt dies.
He would be the first one,
and then the Manicure, she was the one in the hospital that had the lung.
And she was also the woman that met Joey in the bar
Correct.
at the beginning.
Yeah.
So
and
she was like his right-hand gal or whatever.
And that would be 2. And then I thought Nora, which was the roommate, was 3. One of the Cenobites is 4. Okay, then that makes sense. And then I think you could argue Trevor would have been the 5th. It was supposed to be Colin, I think.
Yeah.
And then it ended up being maybe Trevor.
Yeah.
Because it seems like you can kind of bargain with the Cenobites.
Well, yeah,
like,
and that does go back to the original novel where, you know, she unwittingly opens the box and they show up and she figures out that, you know, Frank escaped. And that was another element that they could have, I would have liked to have seen that there was an element of somebody who got out and then she was able to bargain, hey, if I can get this guy back to you that you want that got away, will you let me go? And so there is an element of bargaining here when, you know, the Pinhead says, bring us 2 sacrifices and, you know, we'll let you go or something.
What did you think? I know we're jumping around, but what did you think about one of the Cenobites being a sacrifice? I don't know. I was kind of on the fence on that. Like, I'm like, if you guys are supposed to be kind of almost quote unquote, like, I'm not saying they're gods, but let's say they have godlike powers, right?
Sure. It felt like a cheat. I honestly, I felt like they're like, oh, we made this rule. So if they're going to use the box as a weapon to defend themselves, then we'll have to take that one. But I didn't mind it. At that point, I was so far like unimpressed with the movie that I'm like,
really,
whatever. Yeah, that's fine.
That's a bummer. I mean, I had no problem with. I mean, it was whatever for me. I felt like it was a little bit of a kind of a cheat, but I liked the death. I like, you know, it being ripped apart. You know, I just was like, well, I mean, if you're going to create these rules, wouldn't you create the rules against something like that so that one of you don't? I mean, they're already dead, right?
And what happens? You know, you have the sacrifice, the box. You know, once it takes your blood or samples your blood or whatever, you're marked, and I like that idea.
I do too, yeah.
But I would have liked the each of the deaths or sacrifices or whatever to be marked specifically by whatever that particular configuration is. So it was really, oh, the box got your blood, now it's in this configuration, and apparently the configurations are all supposed to be different and mean something different.
Yeah.
But they all mean the same thing, like you get killed. And
yeah,
it's
basically.
just it turns into just your average slasher flick, you know?
So and I agree with you there. You would have preferred if whatever the configuration was and what was tied to that configuration, that they somehow met their demise by that.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily demise. It's just that, you know, you're pulled away by, like, if you're the type of person who's really into S&M and you're into needles and all that weird shit, somebody who, you know, if you wanted to meet me halfway and say, you've got the people who are really into body modification, and maybe that's what their thing is. And then they meet a Cenobite and they find out what body modification really is, and something like that. You know, another idea to throw out there. But if you've got, it really seemed like the result was the same no matter what configuration the box was in. So they kind of went halfway with it, you know?
Yeah.
They said, oh, all the different configurations mean something different, but the end result, like I said, was the same. You get killed in a nasty way, and that's just gonna move us on to the next plot point, right?
Because I guess I agree with you. Maybe it's just a kind of like a lazy way of getting to the end, right? What if the end result, which we know for Voight, was just to get to that last configuration so he could have another meeting with, say, God. Yeah. I mean, couldn't there have been another way of doing that? Like just getting people to there and just killing them really, you know, with the box.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. Instead of going to this elaborate thing of, like, you know, like you said, they kind of Scooby-Dooed this thing, right?
Right. Yeah. It's just like these zany kids, you know, were more than they bargained for. And it was kind of like, the one of the reasons that I just didn't like Riley's character was, okay, she's a recovering addict. She's in recovery. Where does that come into play anywhere else later in the film?
It really doesn't. Like, the only thing that there seemed to be what's the word I'm looking for? I can't even think right now. But the only time I felt it came into play was when she leaves, right? Because she drinks alcohol and her brother Matt gets mad at her.
It's when she tries to start telling
consequence.
him.
Thank you. I'm just like, dude, I just drew a blank. The only consequence from her being an addict or anything, or let's say reverting back to that, is when Matt goes to look for her, and then he becomes the first sacrifice. that was the consequence for it. Other than that, there was none other than, well, do we believe her? Do we not believe her? Because, when you take
maybe
the...
she was high when she's
exactly.
saying things.
Other than that, it never really came into play.
Yeah.
Other than Matt dying.
Sure.
So I'm like, I don't know.
It like what our main complaint is with all of these movies is just like there's not much character there. There's
not a lot of really development with this. Again, that's where I believe a series is what is needed to really get into the depths of it.
As long as the characters are good, otherwise I would hate it. I wouldn't want to see these characters every week for 8 weeks.
But you're right though. I would say the characters were weak for me. Like I didn't really care for them. The actors were just whatever. Like I didn't like if something happened. Like if something happens to someone during a movie, you want to care. Like, oh man, hopefully they survive. It really,
or like when
I
you
didn't get
have
that.
a character that you don't like that is a really bad person, and then you see this horrible thing happen to them, and there's a payoff where you're like, yeah, I was waiting on so and so to get it,
Yeah, and even Voight, who's supposed to be, this kind of, I don't know, villain.
And they don't really go into him that much, He's
Not
just
at all.
another guy that had power that got more than he bargained for. Now he's trying to manipulate his way out of it the same way he manipulated his way into it.
Do you think, and maybe this was explained, why couldn't he have? I mean, he asks for the sensation or whatever is I think it was sensation he asked for, and of course it wasn't what he bargained for, and this device was stuck in him, right? It basically goes through him, and it somehow. It wraps around. To me, it looked like, I don't know, I'm not going to say organs. It was nerves and stuff. Couldn't he have just? I mean, that was 7 years of that. Couldn't he have killed himself, or doesn't it allow?
I think that's part of it. Yeah, that it kept him alive. Like, and he couldn't die.
He couldn't die because of it.
Yeah, I think.
So it kept him.
It kept him alive. It kept him to the point where, hey, you're not going to die and stop feeling this. Like, you're stuck. When and later on in the movie, when it comes off of him, you see his his spine realign in there, and you see his heart move back into that spot, and his body heals itself. So whatever it was definitely keeping him alive too.
Really? So there was no way out for him.
No way out.
So he was stuck with this, being miserable for 7 years.
Yeah, he had like a Leatherman in there and a knife, and was trying to get out of it. Didn't work. He was stuck like that.
Okay. I mean, that makes more sense. I didn't even think about that. I thought, well, dude, just if it's that bad, just kill yourself. But he couldn't.
Right. He couldn't.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Huh.
He got more than he bargained for.
He got more. What is your pleasure, sir? I did like the little bit of the paying homage. Like there's a scene, like I think when Trevor's at the little bar and he's pulling out the alcohol and he goes to Nora, what is your pleasure?
Right.
Or I think the priest at some point, we have such, I think she said that, right? We have such sights to show you.
I think so. And
was
then
that
there was
the homage?
There was an homage that I thought was a really badly stolen, or not stolen, but the homage when she said, one of the lines I always liked was, "Don't cry, child. It's a waste of good suffering."
Oh, yes, yeah.
And then what did she say? Save your voice for screaming or something like that. I'm like, they were trying to reference that, and I'm like, that's stupid.
As long as you kind of
you need the idea that some people get to this place with these things that see it as, sexual or satisfying or something like that. So when the Cenobite says save your voice for screaming, it's like they know it's all just pain and torture and suffering, but the idea is, I think that the idea needs to be there throughout, that it's all it is more sensation. All it is taking whatever you're into to a ridiculously insane place. And for some people, it's going to be awesome. For most of us, it's going to be terrible.
And I at no point did they really touch on that, did they? Like, I mean, in really in
did
most.
Did she say angels to some, demons to others?
I don't think she did. I don't recall that being a line in there.
And what did you think of Pinhead being female this time?
I loved it.
Yeah.
I actually, dude, I I know it's going to sound crazy and probably make some people mad, but I preferred it.
I wouldn't say I preferred it, but I thought it was definitely an interesting take. I hear people saying that Jamie Clayton did a fantastic job. It was just, for me.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's what really kind of stood out for me was that character.
I wanted
and
to
how
see-
she portrayed it. Like, I don't know, man.
I just feel like there wasn't much to it. It's,
Really?
it's not a character that you emote with, right? It's not a character that you, but I would have liked to have seen more of a seductive aspect to the Cenobites, to just something where you go, oh, is that sexual? That might have been I think that was sexual.
I felt that was which character was that? Was that the Weeper or the one that if you looked at, she was walking up to the mansion and from like, say, her waist down was just, it looked just like regular skin. And that seemed very sexual to me, the way she was created, the way they, the artistic, liberties they took with that particular Cenobite. I felt it was very sexual. Other than that, not so much. I mean, they definitely got rid of all of the, like, they stripped down, got rid of all of, like, the S&M, the leather stuff. I didn't really feel like rewatching it, there was a lot of that, or if any of that. I'm trying to think now.
Of like the leather gear?
Yeah, the leather gear.
It was 100% the Cenobites were all the outfits or costumes they were wearing was skin. Was
and I actually,
decoration.
I actually preferred it. Now, if you're going with just, say, sexual references and like in the original, well, of course, I think the leather conveys that.
Yeah,
right. I mean,
But it would have been like and I know they were limited by the makeup and the costumes that they had them in, but to see a movement that would almost, at least with one of them, to see some kind of movements that are seductive and sexual in nature, and I'm probably outing myself as a little bit of a weirdo.
No, I don't think you are at all. Because
they were always very poised and always very stiff, like the Cenobites, even when they were, walking, except for the Asphyx when, the thing tore off and the Asphyx started running and, moving really quickly.
Yeah.
But I would have liked to have seen an element that was almost kind of burlesque in the way that they moved, or just something like that. Where there's always that part of you that's just like there's something there that I'm drawn to, not 100% repulsed by.
Yeah, there was none of that. I will say you're absolutely right. There was none of that. I felt they completely got away from all of that. Like, I felt like they didn't touch on that really at all. If you think about it, like at what point was there any sort of sexual anything as to the Cenobites?
Yeah, and that they were all seemed to be the same. They have different characteristics, but ultimately, I thought it could have been more interesting. Like, I liked the fat Cenobite.
Yeah.
So the fat Cenobite from before, it calls back to gluttony, some form of sin. Mm-hmm. So if they had, more aspects that were kind of individual, that emoted some kind of, one of the 7 deadly sins or something. I always thought that about the fat Cenobite was that he was gluttony. He was the Cenobite that, he ate too much, and that was kind of what led him down that path.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the other ones, it was all sexual that led them down that path, or maybe there were the ones that enjoyed torturing people or enjoyed, body modification in a way, and slicing your tongue down the middle, and just all of these strange things that, still it gives you enough to be able to identify with, to understand, at least start to understand why somebody would go down that dark, path.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. I mean,
who knows? What are we having thoughts like this about watching a movie anyway, right? It's just a movie. But ultimately, my big complaint with this one is that Clive Barker's movies were always deeper than, and they always wanted you to look at a deeper, darker part of yourself that was scary. It's not a jump scare movie.
Yeah.
There's something, dark inside of you. And
True.
this movie is challenging you, the story, this lore is, trying to make you look at that. But it devolved very quickly when it finally got going, which it was a slow-paced movie up front. It was very boring at the beginning, I thought. And then when the action really kind of starts happening, it devolved into a regular old slasher flick.
It kind of did. I guess I didn't really mind it so much, though. I think because when I went into this, I think I don't know. I think I basically talked myself into like, okay, don't expect a lot. It's a different story. Let's see where they go with it. And so I was pleasantly surprised, I guess, because of the elements that I think I talked about earlier, which is the whole puzzle idea. I love that. I love the whole idea of puzzles and how are you going to incorporate this? Because really, I mean, you're opening this box. Why? It's just a puzzle box, right? And I love the fact that they introduced all these things throughout the movie, and I enjoyed that, and I think that's what I really gravitated towards. And then I loved the look of the Cenobites. I love the different takes. You still had the Chatterer, but it was a different take on the Chatterer.
Yeah.
And then you had like, I don't even know what character. I don't know if it was the Weeper or the guy. I don't remember which one it was, but where the hands split into half.
That was the Weeper.
Is that the Weeper?
Yeah.
And I thought that was
Interesting.
really. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was really cool. Like I just felt it was a different take that we weren't accustomed to seeing in the previous movies.
Like another something that I would have enjoyed seeing is, why does the Chatterer chat? Why does the Weeper weep?
Yeah.
What was the point of the hands, the arms coming apart like that, I would have liked to see, the Cenobites explored more than they did.
But again, man, I absolutely agree with you, but you can't dive into that in 2 hours.
Even if it was just a piece of what do they call it? Exhibition, not exhibition. Exposition.
Exposition, yeah. I agree. I am totally on board with you on that, but I think that has to be done in a series.
Yeah.
That has to be done in a series, man. And that's an 8 or 10 episode series that Hulu could do, since they did this one, and then really dive into that. Because I think we do need that, but that's not going to be done in an hour and a half, 2 hour movie. They're just not, studios aren't going to do that. They're not going to approve that, man. They're just not. And so that's why nowadays with all of these, with a lot of these television shows that you're throwing on, say, HBO Max or whatever it is, Netflix, they'll get an 8 to 10 episode, like The Last of Us, for instance. I know it's based off of.
I still haven't watched that.
I'm halfway through because I'm really terrible at finishing stuff. It's really good. It's not. I didn't finish the first season because I didn't like it. I got through like episode 4 or 5, and there's some really great TV in there, dude.
I would argue that it's not you that's bad at finishing stuff. It's the story being bad at keeping you interested.
Yeah, but that wasn't the case with The Last of Us.
Really?
Oh, no, not at all, dude. I just get lazy. I'll be honest, man. I get lazy sometimes, and I just don't finish something, and that's what, and I'm gonna finish it. I just haven't gotten to it, but it's really good. But now again, it's based off of a video game, but they did a great job with, I think it was 9 episodes or something like that. You can tell the story. If you think each episode is an hour, right? You're getting 9 hours to really.
Absolutely.
In 2 hours, you just can't do that. And I think Hellraiser really warrants that extra time
I think 100%. You're right.
And I hope we get that. I thought I'd read that, but maybe I'm getting that confused with something else. But I really believe we need that, and I hope we get that. Because I think you would probably, as long as it's executed properly, I think you would dig that. Because I feel like, Hellraiser, you reading the books and really being into Clive Barker and knowing the different avenues and all the depth and everything, the backstories.
Yeah.
I think it was almost impossible for them to really, not to say that you set the bar high.
I mean, I think that Hellraiser 1 and 2, like Hellbound and Hellraiser.
Yeah.
I feel like they did a decent enough job of telling that story in what would be a total of 3 hours.
Probably 3 hours, yeah.
Maybe you don't do 6 different configurations of the box, but maybe there's 3, maybe there's 4. It would have been nice to see each Cenobite representing a different configuration of the box.
Yeah.
Just things like that they could have tightened up that story, and
Yeah.
they could have explored more. But instead, it seems like no. Look at us. We made new Cenobites. Check it out, and that's really all they did.
Yeah, I respect that. I definitely liked it.
No, I'll tell you right now. It's been a long time since I saw anything that really blew me away or made me like it, and probably that's about as much about myself and probably being depressed or something like that. But it didn't do anything for me.
Really? Yeah. I guess I just went into it differently.
Yeah, people liked Pinhead's voice in this. I thought it was just overproduced.
Really?
Yeah.
See, Jake, I loved it. I loved the fact that you could still hear the female, but then it was kind of like in between, right? And I because then you could argue, well, like, is it supposed to be a woman? Is it not supposed to be a woman? It's kind of in between,
Well,
and I felt it worked for me.
And in the book, it was completely ambiguous. Like, I like the androgynous nature of it, but I do feel like the Cenobites weren't androgynous; they were female, like the way that the original Pinhead that wasn't androgynous, that was a man. I feel like this was female. It would have been interesting to me to see none of the Cenobites be identifiable as a male or a female, like somewhere
just
in the middle.
open for interpretation, just however you may see it. I get it. I enjoyed the voice, man. It reminded me of, and it must have stuck some sort of filter on it, but it reminded me of Candyman, the voice of Candyman. It had that kind of deep, and it just kind of, I don't know, it kind of vibrated for me. It just sounded really cool. Like I really loved it, man. And so it connected more with me than it did you, and that's okay. Yeah. And I bet you if you asked 100 people, like 50 would like it, maybe 50 didn't.
It probably my answer was pre-programmed when I decided that I didn't, like what they were doing with the movie anyway. So
yeah,
it is what it is. It would have been interesting to see some of that exposition come from Pinhead or from the Cenobites,
Yeah, agreed. But I don't know, man. They get to the mansion, right? They're figuring all this out. This is
they're on their Scooby-Doo mission to try and figure out what happened to their missing.
Riley goes there, and it's funny that none of the house seems to be. It's other than it. No one's been there in a while. She seems to find everything she needs to find and try to figure everything out and stuff. But in the meantime, Void is there the whole time.
He's got a whole series of passageways behind the walls and everything like that.
Yeah. The idea here is, look, we already know he needs 5 sacrifices to have his meeting again with God, or the audience with God, and then so Nora gets cut. She I really did like that scene where they're in the van and they're trying to get out of there, and then the van the back of the van where she's located starts to stretch, and it becomes like she's inside of this
further away.
Yeah, and she's in
she's
in this wall, and then of course she gets,
and there's areas where the concrete starts falling away, and it goes down into the MC Escher thing that reminds you of what I did really like too, and was when they began using the old score from the original movies.
Yeah.
Very dramatic, very gothic, sort of I'm looking for classical composition,
Yeah. What did you think when the priest, or Pinhead, whatever, the priest takes the pin out of, I guess, let's say her head, and sticks it through like Nora's neck almost, and then you see that like glimpse of like, say, her the inside of her mouth.
Oh yeah, the inside.
Yeah, I like
it. Yeah, I did like that. And maybe what they're saying is listen to the music that we can make out of you, using your throat as an instrument. It would have been interesting to have her be screaming, and then when you stick the needle through, have something more interesting come out, like, a more, beautiful pitch come out of her throat or
That would have
something
been
like
kind
that.
of cool. That would have been kind of cool. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, shit, let's see what happens. Colin got beat up to death, man.
Yeah.
Two went through some hell.
Yeah. Not to mention losing your boyfriend at the beginning of the
that would suck. And then, I know one of the Cenobites towards the end, I don't even know what some sort of wires attached to him, and it's just starting to tighten it up on him. But then, Riley essentially stabs Trevor, because Trevor, we find out towards the end of the movie, Trevor was part of this the whole time, which if you hadn't watched it, if you only watched it once, right, you would be maybe a little surprised that he was. But then rewatching for a second time, knowing he was, I start to see all these things. Like there's a scene where she comes in and he doesn't hug her.
That one was interesting. I was waiting for him to have somebody else there. Like, what I mean?
I was too. Yeah. And then how does he afford this nice place? It makes sense that Voight was paying for everything. I mean,
I didn't dig into that. I mean, it's the same way if you're watching an episode of Friends or something and you're like, what do these people do and how do they have that apartment in New York? You don't.
Yeah. But Riley kills Trevor, and he's kind of the fifth sacrifice, and she kind of makes a deal, right, with the Cenobites, or Voight kind of does, right? He's like, they have this kind of conversation, and
just take it out of me.
Just take it out of me, and then he gets taken up essentially.
They say like he wants to give the gift back, and they're like you can't you can't go back on this, but you can exchange it for another.
Yeah,
and that's when he chooses Leviathan power, and apparently when you choose Leviathan, that's what turns you into a Cenobite, right?
Yeah.
So interesting stuff there, and maybe it will be explored more in the next movie.
I felt the ending was a little, I feel like, I know what they were doing, but I wanted a little something more at the end. Like, I understand, he's being turned into a Cenobite, and then it looks like he's on a cross, almost like, but I wanted something else. I don't know what that other thing would have been, but I just felt like it was just an abrupt ending that I wasn't satisfied with. I needed something a little bit more for me.
Like maybe Riley winds up being the final girl. You don't have two people survive. You have the final girl, and she goes home and goes to sleep and has a nightmare of the Voight Cenobite, visiting her or something like that.
That I like. Yeah.
Or maybe there's, different puzzle boxes in different forms somewhere else. And so she unwittingly, I don't know, just spitballing here.
Because did they just leave the box at the mansion? I think they just left it at the
probably.
I think they just left it there for someone to come across again down the road.
Sure. Well, I wouldn't care. I would be getting the F out of there and would just never go back there and never buy another puzzle box in my life.
No. Anyways, that's kind of the gist of it, man. I don't know if there's anything we really didn't touch on. There
were definitely things to like about this, but I feel like you throw a bunch of stuff at a wall and you're gonna get something that's cool. I just didn't think that. I felt like this didn't feel like an auteurs film. It felt like
I don't think it was
a committee in Hulu and the studio and the director's just like, okay, what do you need me to do? All right, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And the actors are just like, man, I hope I can do this movie so that I can get into a better movie later. And
so is it safe to say you felt this was more style than substance? Is that accurate?
I absolutely.
Yeah. And typically I would be on board with you. It didn't bother me though that much. And I'm kind of surprised because I
just think there was more substance there that they didn't tap into. And it's one of those things. I'm not the type of person that will see something, not like it, and think I can do it better. I'm definitely one of those people. I'll watch a terrible movie, and be like, that's way better than I could ever do. But when I do have these ideas when I'm watching a movie, I'm like, oh, that would have been better if they had done that.
Yeah,
And I go
yeah.
like, didn't somebody think of that? Like,
Yeah,
I'm not the smartest guy in the room. Like, why didn't somebody think of that?
I think there's always a reason, though. I think when you get the studios involved, and then
There's some producer's ego that's like, no, man, this was my idea. And even though somebody had a better one, I want my idea in this movie.
Yeah. I think there's so many variables that go into it. And I mean, I do it sometimes with movies. I didn't do it so much with this one, but I'm on board with what you're saying. I don't disagree with you. I think it's just doing it in a 2 hour, 2 hours with executives in a studio going, no, yes, you could do that, but not that. And then we got to go this route and all those other things. I mean, I've done that many a times on the podcast. So yeah, maybe
I think there's a whole political process that happens.
There is
on every movie that, that's why I think we both would agree that we would rather watch something that is the brainchild of one person and one person's vision than watch something like this that's, the rights have been bouncing back and forth between all these different companies, and it's all part of a deal, and the whole thing is a compromised process between 12 parties with different interests. And yeah, I think this movie is probably a very direct result of that.
Yeah. Maybe we'll get some sort of like limited TV series of like say 8 to 10 episodes, and maybe the person behind it has all the creative control and they're just left alone to do it. And
Clive Barker is at the very least a consultant on
Absolutely.
that, or write the damn thing, Clive.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, that's 2022's Hellraiser. Thanks again, man, for coming out.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate you coming, man. I guess before we let people go, Lesser Sons, again, what is it on Instagram?
Lesser Sons Band on Instagram, Lesser Sons Band on Facebook, as well as YouTube.
Cool. Yeah, everyone,
out.
go check them out. And yeah, dude, appreciate it, man. Everyone, take care, and thanks for listening.
Good night.
You listened all the way to the end. We appreciate that. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Ear for Fear Podcast, Twitter at Ear for Fear, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Ear for Fear Podcast. You can also check out our website, earforfear.com. There we list news and events. We're available on all the main platforms, so make sure you tell a friend. We hope you come back and get an earful.